So I would like to start the program for this evening. Good evening, everybody. My name is Tawisak. ชื่อ Tawisak นะครับ I am the King Scholarship Society committee member who organized this event, the Dhamma Talk, by ท่านอาจารย์ Amaro on the topic navigating a polarized society. And today I would like to remind you a few more things first. First of all, there are booklets up front at the entrance by ท่านอาจารย์ with different titles, so feel free to take some on your way out. Second of all, there's a charity box that you can make a donation, and the donation will go to Amaravati.
The books are completely free. The books are 100% free, 100%. So any donation that you wish to make for Amaravati or anything is completely separate. The books are there to take.
And may I ask ท่านอาจารย์ the donation will go to what? To do what project?
We have a very large construction project going at Amaravati at the moment, rebuilding and building a whole new sala and workshop complex. So donations will be gratefully received to support that.
The sala, the canteen, the garden, the workshop complex all together to restore this facility. And last but not least, I would like to ask for your consent to use photos taken today for the promotion purpose of King Scholar Society platform, for example, the Facebook fan page of KSS. So with that, I would like to invite Kun Anik Amaranan, the chairperson of King Scholar Society, to provide some opening remarks. Over to you, Kapi Anik.
ค่ะก็สวัสดีทุกท่านนะคะแล้วก็กราบนมัสการพระอาจารย์ก่อนแล้วก็สวัสดีทุกท่านขอต้อนรับสู่งานแสดงธรรมนะคะเรื่อง navigating a polarized society นะคะจัดโดยชมรมนักเรียนทุนและเรียนหลวงซึ่งเป็นการรวมตัวของนักเรียนทุนนะคะนักเรียนทุน Kings เพื่อจะทำกิจกรรมเพื่อสาธารณประโยชน์นะคะอาทิเช่นจัดแสดงธรรมโดยพระอาจารย์ชยสาโรในปี59หลังจากเสด็จสวรรคตแล้วก็ทำหนังสือจากงานวันนั้นนะคะหนังสือชีวิตที่ดีที่สุดแจกเป็นธรรมทานมีจัดเสวนาเสือดำและเรื่องที่ใหญ่กว่าหลังจากกรณีเสือดำนะคะในวันนั้นก็มีการช่วยกันหาทุนแล้วก็บริจาคให้กับมูลนิธิสืบนาคเสถียรแล้วก็เขตรักษาพันธุ์สัตว์ป่าอุ้มผางนะคะถัดมาก็จะมีสอนประวัติศาสตร์อย่างไรเมื่อคนรุ่นใหม่ตื่นตัวก็จะเป็นเสวนาที่จัดขึ้นในช่วงที่เด็กๆมัธยมออกมาเดินถนนนะคะก็สอดคล้องกับเหตุการณ์แล้วก็ล่าสุดก็มีการบริจาคสู้โควิดในช่วงปี64นะคะเราก็ร่วมกันบริจาคที่สิริราชจุฬาสวนดอกเชียงใหม่แล้วก็ขอนแก่นนะคะสำหรับกิจกรรมในวันนี้เราได้รับความเมตตากรุณาเป็นอย่างมากจากพระอาจารย์อมโรนะคะท่านเจ้าอาวาสของวัดอมราวดีที่ประเทศอังกฤษนะคะที่ท่านจะมาพูดคุยกับพวกเราในเรื่องที่เป็นสถานการณ์ปัจจุบันในชีวิตของทุกๆคนเพราะว่าทุกคนในห้องนี้ก็คงเจอไม่มากก็น้อยผู้ที่เรารู้สึกว่าเห็นต่างกันนะคะบางคนอาจจะใกล้ตัวมากแต่ว่าความเห็นอาจจะต่างกันมากอาจจะต่างจนสุดขั้วเดี๋ยวเรามาฟังท่านอาจารย์นะคะแต่ก่อนจะถึงตรงนั้นก็อยากจะขออนุญาตเล่าประวัติพระอาจารย์สั้นๆโดยใช้ภาพประกอบจากอินเทอร์เน็ตนะคะอุ๊ยพี่เลยละถอยค่ะท่านอาจารย์ was born in England in 1956. He received a Bachelor's of Honours in Psychology and Physiology from the University of London in 1977. Then, spiritual searching led him to Thailand, where he went to Wat Pa Nanachat. In 1979, the Venerable Ajahn Chah ordained him as a monk. Soon afterwards, he returned to England and joined Ajahn Sumeto at the newly established Chithurst Monastery. In 1985, he was invited to join the new Amaravati Monastery, where he resided for 10 years. In 1996,ท่านอาจารย์ established Abhayagiri Monastery in Redwood Valley, California, where he was co-abbot with Ajahn Pasanno for 14 years. In 2010, he was invited to return to Amaravati as abbot of this large monastic community. Thanachan has authored and co-authored about 30 books, all for free distribution and some in front of this hall. Last but not least, he was honored by King Rama IX with the title Pravithet Puthikun in 2015, and in 2019 he was honored by King Rama X with the title Praracha Puthi Warakun. Without further ado, let us hear the words of wisdom from Thanachan on this very topical subject, navigating a polarized society. กราบเรียนเชิญพระอาจารย์ค่ะ
So I'm very happy to be here this evening with the King's Scholars Society at the invitation of Kun Anik. And I recognized from her surname, Amranand, that looks like a familiar name. And I remembered that her brother-in-law, Kun Bao was at Wat Ba Nanachat when I was a novice there about 45 years ago. Kun Bao was a Pakao there on 8 precepts. So we were experimenting or exploring spiritual life early on together. So I'm very happy to continue the family connection and to be with you all this evening. So I'll start with our usual way of expressing say respect and devotion to the Triple Gem. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. I also should apologize that my voice is a little bit unclear as I came down with a cold yesterday. I was in Italy with a large group of people for the Plukpata Sima, establishing a Sima boundary at Santa Citarama Monastery in Italy, and there was a gathering of about 100 monks and several hundred lay people, so I picked up a bug, a cold from somebody along the way, but hopefully my voice will be clear enough for everyone this evening. So Kun Anik suggested this title, Navigating a Polarized Society, and I thought this was an interesting title, and particularly I think it is informed by the recent election here in Thailand. I live in the UK, in England, and so I don't pretend to have any kind of detailed knowledge of Thai politics, but I did pick up through people's conversations and through a certain amount of the media that there is, say, that sense of polarization or instability, difficulty with, say, and concern about how Thailand is going to be governed, how the country will evolve and develop with the two leading political parties. I did a little bit of homework before this evening, and so I read up that the two main parties that seem to be leading from the vote is the Move Forward Party and the Pheu Thai Party. That's about the extent of my knowledge of Thai politics. So, and also as a monk, we don't take sides politically. And so I thought, without, say, dwelling this evening or making this evening about who's the party to go for or to vote for or who to be worried about, to talk about polarization as a principle in a much more broad sense would be more helpful. Again, I'm not knowledgeable about Thai politics, but even British politics, where I live. As a monastic, we don't take sides. We might have particular feelings or perspectives, but we don't take sides. We don't vote in elections, and we're there to be a spiritual resource for everybody, whatever place someone is on the spiritual spectrum. Our aim as a monastery or as monastics is to be a resource of wisdom and goodness and unselfishness for everyone, wherever you might be on the spectrum. Also, I'm speaking in English, and I'll try to use language which is fairly simple and clear, but there'll be an opportunity for questions if anything that I say is, difficult to follow or needs clarification later on. So rather than dwelling upon the particular issues of Thai society right now and the political situation of who's got the most votes or who's going to take power or how that might work, looking at this theme, navigating a polarized society, I felt, well, all of us as human beings, we live with a lot of polarities. And again, I presume most of you know what polarized means. It means this against that. And so one group or one body as opposed to another. That polarization, like North and South, the North Pole, South Pole, they are polarized. They're opposite qualities. So I would say that all of us live with a lot of those polarizations. And that just giving an example, within the Buddhist world, you have Theravada Mahayana, Dhammayut Mahanikai. Also within society, we have the rich and the poor. We have the country people, the city people, the older people, the younger people. There are many different divisions that we all live with, and all of these areas of concern. People have come to me or other monks and nuns in the role of teaching and say, oh, what do we do about the divide between the rich and the poor, or the old and the young, the traditionalists and the modernists? How do we find a place to meet? Because it's so easy for us to become in a state of conflict that we think, I'm right and they're wrong. We've got a problem with them. We're okay, but they are a problem. And so this happens in so many different dimensions of our lives, even in the family. The brother who's trying to get all the money from the parents. I'm not reading anybody's mind. I haven't looked at your Facebook pages, but it's kind of statistically likely that there are conflicts in families with this sister or that brother, and we find ourselves opposed. That polarization, that opposition. So I thought to look at that process this evening as a general principle, so then we can apply it both in the political sphere here in Thailand or within our family or the business world or wherever it might be useful. Even within monastic life, as I say, you have the forest monks, the city monks, the Dhammayut Mahanikai. And in the time when Luang Por Chah was teaching in the 1970s and 60s, there was a lot of conflict or competition, polarization in Thailand. Monasteries, are you a Satipatthana monastery or are you a Samatha Vipassana monastery? Which group do you belong to? And so Luang Por Chah spent a lot of time saying, where people would take a stand, saying, this is a Vipassana monastery. This is what we do. And they, no, we're a Satipatthana monastery. This is what we do. We're a Samatha monastery. This is what we do. He would say, these are all teachings of the Lord Buddha. These are all about the same mind. These are all just upai, skillful means that we use to work with this one mind of ours. We don't need to create a fight or create a opposition. But yeah, even within the realm of forest monastics or spiritual practitioners, you can still take hold of an idea, a principle, a practice, and hold it in an unskillful way, so it becomes a cause for conflict, for difficulty. So that's what I'd like to look at this evening, and we can open up for discussion later on. So I would say, whatever the area might be, whether it's Thai political life, or the business world, or the family, or the spiritual, the world of spiritual practice, meditation, the issue is not that we have a particular perspective, something that we see as true or good or useful for ourselves, but the issue is attachment, clinging. That's where the problem, the problematic or the cause of difficulty and suffering is through the quality of clinging, of attachment. That's the where the trouble begins. So that, say, within the UK, again, going back to the political arena, Brexit or no Brexit, the big topic of discussion, and or Scotland trying to go independent. Should Scotland be independent or not? You know, these are big issues, but you could see that it's quite okay for someone to say, yes, Scotland should be independent. Like, no, the UK should stay together, or the UK should leave Europe, or should stay with Europe. It's quite fine for individuals to have their own perspective. What's going to be good for the family? What's going to be good for your spiritual practice? So the issue is not the point of view that we each have as individuals. Where the trouble starts is, I'm right, you're wrong. That kind of, say, identification, the attachment to a particular viewpoint, that's where the difficulty begins. And so then our good intention, what we see as absolutely right and helpful for the family, for the society, for the business, for the college or whatever, that gets distorted, that gets turned into a cause of difficulty because of the way that we're holding it. That's the difficulty. So and almost as it comes across in the Lord Buddha's teaching, if you are thinking the words, I'm right, you're wrong, that should be a red flag. That's a sign that, wait a minute, that sounds like I'm attaching to something. That sounds like I'm clinging to something. Let's just take a step back and have another look at the situation. So I'd like to share a story with you that Lumpur Sumeto has often told about when he was a young monk in his early days in Wat Nong Papong. This was long before most of you were born. Probably about 1969, 1970, so long time ago, more than 50 years ago. So he was a young monk. He was the only Farang monk in Wat Papong at that time. And in America, and I am also an American citizen as well as being British, so I can speak on behalf of Americans. So it's very strong force in American society. It's good to be righteously indignant. I realize that's a bit of a technical term, but that is I'm right, you're wrong, and I should get upset with how wrong you are. So that means to be righteously indignant is like, you're wrong, and I have to set you straight. And in America, that's quite praised. To be righteously indignant, you should. They have a saying there: if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. It's an interesting kind of declaration. So it's quite natural for Americans to be righteously indignant and to feel that they're doing a good thing to be that way. So at this time, there was a monk who had arrived fairly recently at Wat Nong Papong, Ajahn Chah's monastery in Ubon. And this monk was very loud-spoken. Now, I know most Thai people are very, very quiet, very modest, and are very gentle with each other. This is not to be making too many generalizations. And as quite a loud person myself, you know, I realize that people vary. But this particular monk was very loud, very outspoken, and often used quite bad language. And so when he arrived in the monastery and was say, fitting in with people there, the young Ajahn Sumeto, Tan Sumeto, was thinking, oh, this monk is really loud. He speaks really, when he talks, he's really noisy, and I don't understand the language very well, but wow, I think that's a really rude word to use. He shouldn't be talking like that. And as time went by, this monk didn't seem to adapt, but carried on being loud and irritating. And then the young Tan Sumeto noticed that other monks would tend to avoid him or move away when he started talking. And so he was puzzled. He thought, why doesn't Lumpur set him straight? You know, he just seems to let him carry on. And this isn't right. Something should be done about this. And so because Lumpur Cha would be there when this monk was talking to the whole group or making a lot of noise, and Lumpur was just would just kind of let him let him run. And so after several weeks of this, the young Tansumeto was quite sort of, something should be done. This is not right. And so Lumpo-cha went away to visit one of the local branches, I think. And so at the fortnightly recitation, the Patimokkha recitation that we have every 2 weeks of our rule, at the end of the recitation, the senior monk will say to the group, does anyone have any business they wish to discuss? So normally Lumpo-cha would be the senior monk, and if anything was to be brought up, he would receive that. So on this occasion, young Tansumeto he knew Lumpo-cha was going away, and he'd made a list, all the things that were wrong with this loud monk. And so he decided, okay, if Lumpo-cha is not going to do anything about it, I'll bring it up with the Sangha anyway. So that when I think Ajahn Liam, Tanajan Liam was leading the group, said, so any matters to discuss? So then Tansumeto says, yes, there's something I'd like to bring up. And then he went through his list of all of the things that were wrong about this loud monk. And he was accurate. So he reported things that he had heard. He didn't exaggerate. It was like, well, this is what he said, this is when he said it, and this is what other monks said to me or to others in reaction to that. So this all being the case, this monk should be scolded. He should be admonished. He should be told, you can't act this way. This is wrong and bad. So he really embarrassed the loud monk. He's sitting right there with the rest of the group, and he made him really embarrassed. Nadek, ching ching. So he was really shamed in front of the whole group, and he's looking at the floor through the whole of this time, and so when Ajahn Sumedho got to the end of his delivery, then Lumpo Liam, who's very, very upeka kind of person, said, "Oh, thank you, Tansumeto. I think we've heard what we need to hear." Joke. That's enough. And so then the meeting came to an end. So Tansumeto thought, well, okay, I'm really glad finally someone told that monk where things are at, and he really needs to straighten out his behavior. But what happened was within a day or so, that monk packed up his bowl, took his robes, and left the monastery before Lumpo-cha got back. Just bye. He took off. So then when Lumpo-cha returned a little while later, news came to him pretty quickly about, where did the loud monk go? Oh, well, Lumpo, we have to tell you. Tansumeto really gave him an earful at the last Patimokkha. And so Lumpo-cha waited for the right moment and then summoned Tansumeto to have a little chat with him. Just the two of them talking together. And he said, Tansumeto, what you did with that monk at the Patimokkha meeting, that was really wrong. Do you think I didn't realize how loud he was? Do you think I didn't realize how bad his language was? Of course I was aware of that. And do you think it was an accident that I gave him that amount of space? Because this was the last monastery he could live at. He'd been kicked out of every other place he'd been living. So this was the last practice monastery where he could stay. And now you've shut the door on him. So you have to accept the fact that you've closed the door on the practice of Dhamma for him. So that's on you, Sumedho. So he felt, okay, I didn't realize that. And so that the comment that Lumpo-cha then made, he said, you were right in fact, but wrong in Dhamma. Yes, he's loud. Yes, his language is really bad. And yes, all those things were true. So all your facts were correct, but your attitude, the tasanakati, was aggressive, that was destructive, that was filled with dosa, with aversion. So what I wanted to share with you all this evening on this theme of navigating a polarized society and dealing with polarities is that principle of, yes, we can be right in fact, but wrong in Dhamma. Like, yes, our information is correct. Yes, the issues that we care about are important, and yes, we want to do something about it in the family, in the society, in the workplace, wherever it might be. But what is the tasanakati? What is the attitude? How are we picking that up? Are we right in our attitude in the Dhamma as well as in the information that we have, or the material that we're speaking about? So this, I feel, is a very, very helpful teaching, very short teaching that Luang Por Chah gave to the young Tan Sumeto, but it stayed with him for many, many years, and he realized, oh yeah, it's so easy to be right in fact and wrong in Dhamma. You get focused on what's wrong with that person, or what needs to be done, or what I want to get, and you don't notice the attitude behind it. In the Karaniya Metta Sutta, the discourse on loving kindness, the most of the teaching is about metta bhavana, spreading, how to spread loving kindness to all beings. But the last verse, the last 4 lines of the Karaniya Metta Sutta, they address these qualities of clinging, of attachment, in a very direct way. Those of you who are familiar with that teaching, it's probably the most commonly recited Dhamma teaching from the Pali Canon in the Theravada, the southern Buddhist world. But you'll have noticed perhaps that the last 4 lines is a kind of change of gear. And the Pali goes, Ditincha anupagamma silava dasnena sampanno kame suvinaya gaitang nahigabba sayang punareti ti. So by not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desire, is not born again into this world. So it's a change of gear from the teaching about loving kindness, and in a way it's saying, if we really want to practice loving kindness, if we really want to embody that kindly heart, what needs to happen is to let go of clinging. And so that there are these 4 different types of clinging that the Lord Buddha spoke about, that are spelled out there in that last verse. By not holding to fixed views, that's talking about dit upadana, the attachment to views and opinions. Ditti means views and opinions. So by not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desire, is not born again into this world. So the second one, Silavadasanena, is about clinging to the conventions that we have. Silapata paramasa is the long Pali word. So this is the attachment to not just religious conventions about how to recite Namo Tassa or how to bow properly, but Luang Por Chah would expand that Silapata paramasa, attachment to conventions. Says this is the conventions that we have in society. What are the right clothes to wear? What is the correct side of the road to drive on? What is money worth? These are all Siddhapata. These are all conventions that we live with. And he would use the example of money. He'd say, you take a piece of paper and you print a pattern of ink on it, and you say, this is 10 baht. You print a different pattern of ink on it, and you say, this is 100 baht. So just because of the pattern of ink, this piece of paper becomes worth 10 times as much. This is Silapata Paramasa. This is the conventions that we create. And he would say that, if we wanted to, we could make chicken dung the currency, instead of paper money or plastic. Nowadays, even paper money is old-fashioned. So they have plastic money or just digital money. They'd say, well, you could use chicken dung as money, and people would fight and argue over how much chicken dung they've got. So these are just, we give something value, and then we fight over the resources. So that clinging to conventions, this is the right thing to do, this is the wrong thing to do. So then the next one is kamupadana, which is clinging to sense pleasure. This is what I like, therefore it's good. This is what I call beautiful, therefore it is beautiful. So that clinging to what we call sense pleasure, kama upadana. And then the fourth one, these four kinds of upadana, four kinds of clinging, is attavad upadana. So that atta is self. So this is basically clinging to ego and pride, like I want this, I am this. Don't you know who I am? That kind of, I'm the professor, I'm the consultant here, I'm your father. This is what I am. That attavad upadana is about ego and pride, and again, these another area of clinging and attachment. So I would say that how we get polarized is through these four different kinds of clinging. So clinging to sense pleasure, clinging to conventions, clinging to views and opinions, and clinging to ego, to self-view. So those are the, and you could probably find a few more areas, but that covers most of it. This is how we find ourselves divided. And good-hearted people in the same family, in the same company, in the same group, we find ourselves arguing with each other and getting conflicting and bitter with each other because of these different kinds of clinging. Yeah, I'm just remembering the local pub I used to go to before I was a monk. They had a verse on the wall in a kind of a notice on the pub wall, which basically said, "No conversations about politics or religion," to avoid arguments. So here, stop and spend a social hour in harmless mirth and fun. I won't go on with the rest of it, but I can remember that from 50 years ago. So that because of, this is how we end up conflicting and fighting, is because of these different kinds of clinging. Now the question then comes, how do we recognize those patterns of clinging and attachment, and how do we let go of them? How can we, train the mind, work with the mind to recognize that unskillful habit and let go of it? It's not about not having good things to offer. It's not about not having a point of view. It's not about disconnecting from other people, from the family, from the society, or just dissociating from everyone. Peace isn't found through just numbing our life, but rather it's much more helpful to understand that it's through recognizing this habit of clinging, learning to let go of it, and then we can most effectively use the ideas that we have, the things that we can offer, the way that we can valuably contribute to society, to the family, and so forth. So another teaching that I thought I would share with you this evening that's very significant from the Prasut, from the Pali Suttas, is a discourse called the sweet morsel, the Madhu Pindaka Sutta, also known as the honey ball. And this is a very helpful teaching about meditation and perception. And it starts off with the Buddha sitting by himself under a tree in the forest. And he's quietly meditating, and a Brahmin called Dandapani comes wandering through the forest. And Dandapani, according to the story, it tells in the sutta, was a professional debater. So even today in India, that people can make a living out of creating arguments. And as I understand it, sometimes people will hire two philosophers, two arguers, to come and be the entertainment at a marriage, or at a birthday party, hire two philosophers to argue with each other to kind of entertain the crowd. So Dandapani was one of these kind of professional debaters, and he was quite proud of his abilities and his status. And Dandapani literally means stick in hand, or weapon in hand. That's his name. And he came along with his walking stick kind of through the forest and saw the Buddha sitting under a tree, and he thought, oh, this is the Samana Gautama. He's a famous spiritual master. He's very well known his skill in teaching and meditation. So I'll put a question to him and show him how flawed, how imperfect his philosophy is, and how superior my perspective is, and my ability to defeat him in argument. So he's looking for a fight. And so that then he stands in front of the Buddha and clicks his tongue and makes a bit of a noise, and the Lord Buddha opens up his eyes, and Dandapani says to him, "So, Samana, what philosophy do you follow? What kind of spiritual practice do you teach? What is your spiritual method?" And the Buddha, who was not only blessed with great psychic powers, but also was a very, very astute judge of human nature, he knew exactly what this guy was doing. And so he replied by saying, I follow such a spiritual method, such a philosophy that embodies non-contention with anyone in the world. Basically, I'm not going to argue with you. So then, as the story goes, then Dandapani clicks his tongue 3 times, and his brow furrows into the three lines, and he has nothing to say and has to just take himself away, because he's completely defeated by the Buddha saying, "I'm not going to enter into an argument with you." Like in the old days in Europe, when 2 knights wanted to have a contest with each other, one would take off one of their gloves and knock the other one in the face with their glove, their gauntlet, and then throw the gauntlet, the armored glove, down on the ground. And so it's as if this Dandapani had knocked the Buddha's face with his gauntlet and thrown it down on the ground, and the Buddha had just said, "Nice glove, You'll want to pick that up or you won't have a pair, And so Dandapani had no response. So he took off. And then the Lord Buddha stayed there in the forest for a while longer, then went back to the monastery. And then there was a small group of monks gathered there. And so he recounted this incident of how Dandapani had tried to pick a fight with him and how he had responded. And then he went off after a little moment. But the last thing he said was, it is through attachment to thoughts and perceptions that we end up in a state of argument, in conflict. This is why we pick up weapons. This is how we contend with each other. This is the source of all conflict in the world. And then he went away and went to enter the Ganda Kuti, went into his kuti and left the Sangha alone. So I thought, oh, that last thing he said was really interesting. So attachment to perceptions and thoughts is the cause of all conflict in the world. How does that work? So then they thought of Mahakachana, one of the great arahants, and Mahakachana was famous for being able to explain in detail the brief statements that the Buddha had made. That was his kind of particular skill as a kind of one who was gifted at elaborating the Lord Buddha's comments. So they said, let's go find Mahakachana. He'll be able to spell this out for us. So they went to his kuti and described what the Buddha had said and the background to it. And Mahakachana then gave this wonderful teaching. He said, well, what he meant was, when something is perceived, say, for example, with sight, so there is the eye, there is the visual object, the visual form, the rupa, and then when the light from the rupa meets the eye, then eye consciousness arises. And the coming together of those 3, the sense organ, the object, and the eye and the consciousness arising, that is phassa, that is sense contact. When there is sense contact, there is immediately feeling, pleasant feeling, painful feeling, neutral feeling. So one of those 3 will arise. Then following upon that feeling, there arises sanya. The mind then registers red or blue or green or moving or not moving. And that kind of perception is recognized by the mind. That's sanya. So the English word sign is related to the Pali sanya. So that, or in terms of neuroscience, it's like the visual cortex producing a particular pattern that says red or blue or yellow or moving towards, moving away. So then following upon that sanya, there arises thought, vitaka, conceptual thought. And the thought might be, that's red, or that's moving towards me. So that the vitaka, the thought, is the use of language and memory to describe what is being perceived. So far so good, so simple. Then, so that vitaka, that conceptual thought, that leads to papancha. And papancha is, in English you'd translate as conceptual proliferation. So this is the chattering of the mind that says, oh, that's a very nice red. Oh, I think I need that for my curtains. Oh, but I was arguing with my husband last week whether we really need new curtains or not. And so papancha is that strings of thought that lead one after the other, after the other, after the other. So that in Thai language, or in the Isan, they were called as prungdang, the kind of flavoring the curry, that the mind getting lost in its own thoughts. And then that leads, at the end of that process, to what is called papancha sanya sankhar, which the Buddha or Mahakachana described. This is the whole array of thoughts and perceptions that beset the heart and create the sense of pressure between me here and the world there. That's the sense of conflict, that the mind has brought into a particular judgment, a particular point of view, and there's me here and the world there, and that pressure, the tension between the two. Either there's a thing I don't like that I'm opposed to, or a thing that I do like that I haven't got, or a thing that I have got that I'm afraid I'm going to lose. So all of these are, say, the end result of that papancha process. So this is the way that Mahakachana described, what the Buddha was saying, saying that's why it leads to conflict and contention. Basically, the more that we believe our perceptions as absolutely real, and our opinions that arise from those, then the more that we are naturally out of harmony with the other people around us, the world around us. We're more absorbed in our own version of the world and our thoughts about the world, so naturally we are out of harmony. Like if you're playing in an orchestra and you start to lose your hearing or you lose your vision, you can't keep watching the conductor, you can't hear what's going on around you, so naturally you're going to be losing the tune, you're going to be losing the rhythm, you're going to be out of harmony with everyone around you. So this process of getting lost in papancha, in the prungdang, that mental proliferation, is how we get in a state of disharmony with others, and then the more there is ignorance and the more there is ego involved, then the more that leads to conflict between ourselves and others. Like, you shouldn't be that way, or why have you got that? I want one too. That's not fair. What about me? So that this is how then Mahakachana explained, this is why getting lost in that process of perception and proliferation leads to taking up weapons, to conflict and argument and contention, the polarized society. And so then at the end of that discourse, then Ananda, who was part of the group, was very inspired and thought, well, that's a really fantastic explanation. That's really, really good. I better go and check with the master to see if he agrees. And so then Venerable Ananda went to pay respects to the Lord Buddha later on, and Ananda had perfect memory, perfect recall, so he recounted the whole of the explanation that Mahakachana had given, and the Buddha said, that's exactly how I would have explained it. Mahakachana has put it in the precise words I would have used. And Ananda was very impressed by that, and he said, well, this is wonderful, this is an amazing teaching. It's like a sweet morsel, it's like a ball of honey. What should we call this discourse? And the Buddha said, you can call it the honey ball discourse. So from that time, from Ananda being a bit over-enthusiastic, which he often was, then it became called the honey ball, or the sweet morsel sutta ever since. So if you're interested to look that up, it's sutta number 18 in the Majjhima Nikaya. So it's a very helpful teaching in terms of spiritual training and in terms of our practice. So that the if we recognize this is how we get lost and how we end up conflicting with others, and our good heart is getting buried in our say contention against other people in this polarized state, then one of the ways that we can work with that is when we notice that we are arguing, or we're in that I'm right, you're wrong. You know, if you were different, I would be happy. You know, you need to change, so I'll be happy. If we find ourselves in that kind of a state, say, well, wait a minute, how did I get to this particular opinion? How did I arrive here? And one of the practices that are very closely related to this teaching is called tracing things back to the origin, or also called tracing back the radiance. So when you find your mind in that state of a conflict, judging someone, or getting caught up in aversion and hatred and tension about some other, then if you follow the train of thought, okay, how did I get here? And you realize, oh, I'm getting lost in this criticism about this political party, and where did this begin? And well, I've been thinking about this for the last 10 minutes, but what was it that caused me to start thinking about this? And you think, well, where was it? I was just on, just at the beginning of Sukhumvit, just come onto Sukhumvit, and I saw somebody in a red shirt, or a yellow shirt, and I saw that color, and I thought, oh, and seeing that color of that shirt, before that moment, my mind was quite peaceful. Then I saw that color, and I thought, red shirt. And then that whole story began. Look at that. It was just the eye perceiving light, and somebody, when they put that shirt on that day, probably thought, it's a clean shirt. They're not making any kind of particular statement. They just put a shirt on because they needed one. That was it. And my mind made this whole story out of this shirt, or a yellow shirt, or a purple shirt, or I'm not sure what the current colors are for the Pheu Thai party or the Move Forward. Probably different colors now. Orange, there you go. So red's okay now. Orange, or purple. You can see how arbitrary, how it's the conditioning of the mind says, now red is okay. Totally okay. Orange is now an alarm call, or yellow, or purple, or blue. So it's we see, oh, look at that, it's just a color. The eye receives the light, and the mind perceives it, and then this whole story begins. Look at that. So if you trace it back to the origin, you hear, oh, it was just a color, it was just a sound, it was just a random memory, it was just a smell that, and not necessarily about political opinions, but can take us back, just something that you smell walking past a restaurant, and something meets your nose, and you go, oh, that smells just like my grandmother's curry. Wow, Granny, oh, I miss her so much. And why did she move away? And then you get lost in a whole story about your grandmother and where she's gone to. So if we trace it back to its origin, the kind of outgoing mental energy, you trace that brightness, that radiance back, you realize, oh, it was just a smell. It was just a sound. It was just a light being received by the eye. That's all. So the further you go back to the origin, the simpler things become. And so that the going against that stream of papancha, then if we make a point of following things back, we see, oh, actually, that's all it was. It was just seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. No big story. And the further you go back towards the origin, the less tuaton, the less ego there is. It's just seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. So another related teaching in this respect, let's see, I've been talking for about 40 minutes or so I'll just speak for a little bit longer, and then we'll open things up for some questions. So another or related teaching that I feel is very helpful to consider is a dialogue between the Lord Buddha and a wanderer called Bahia. Some of you might be familiar with this teaching. So Bahia was a notable spiritual teacher. He was a leader of a different spiritual group that was out on the northwest coast of India. And he thought that he was an arahant. He was under the impression he was a totally enlightened being. And was the leader, the teacher of this group of his Luksit, his disciples. And then one night this Devata appeared, who had been a relative of Bahia in the previous human life. And so appeared to Bahia and said, well, you're under the impression that you are an arahant, but actually you are not. And you're not even on the path to arahantship. So I'm just want to inform you of that you're not doing anything that will help you to arrive at arahantship. So sorry about that. So then Bahia asked, to his credit, rather than, who do you think you are? he said that, well, are there any arahants in the world? And if so, where are they? And then the Deva said, well, actually there is. There's this monk, Gautama, it's the Samana Gautama, who is indeed a great arahant and a teacher, and he's living near Savatthi in the kingdom of Kosala. And so, to Bahia's credit, he started walking then and there, just that night, to set out to go and find the Lord Buddha. And he walked something like 200 or 300 miles across northern India to get to Savatthi. And then he arrived in the early morning, and the Buddha was on the alms round in the streets of Savatthi. And so then Bahia saw the Buddha and knelt down in the dust of the street and said, "Venerable Sir, you are the Samana Gautama. Please teach me what you know." And the Buddha said, "Bahia, this is we're on our alms round. This is not a convenient time for teaching. Please come and visit at the Jetavana later on." He said, "Venerable Sir, life is uncertain. No one knows when they might die. So please teach me the Dhamma." And this being a Buddhist teaching, they go back and forward 3 times. So after he asks a second time, the Buddha says, "This is not a convenient time." After the 3rd time, then the Buddha says, "Well, when a Tathagata is asked 3 times, then he has to reply. So pay attention." So what he said to Bahia was, "In the seen, there is only the seen. In the heard, there is only the heard. In the sensed, there is only the sensed," like the smelling, tasting, touching. "In the cognized, in the thought, there is only the thought." This is how you should train yourself. When you recognize that in the seen, there is only the seen, in the heard, there is only the heard, and so forth, then you will recognize that there is no thing there, that the world of material objects is empty. And when it is seen that there is no thing there, it will also be recognized there is no thing here on the side of the subject. There is no self. And when there's a letting go of the subject and the object, you will not be able to find yourself in the world of this, in the world of that, or any place between the two. This, Bahia, is the end of suffering. And this it's a subtle teaching, but a very powerful one. And Bahia became an arahant right there, listening to the Lord Buddha's teaching. So he got the kind of award for the one who understood the Buddha's teaching most quickly. And so that he literally heard that brief teaching and ended all suffering right there. And so then he said, "Venerable Sir, I'd like to become a monk under your guidance." And the Buddha said, "Well, do you have robes and an alms bowl?" And Bahia he wore robes made out of tree bark, and he didn't have an alms bowl. He just received food into his hands. He said, "I don't have robes and I don't have a bowl." The Buddha said, "Well, if you can find robes and a bowl, then I can give you the upasampada." So Bahia went off to try and find some pieces of cloth and a bowl to use as an alms bowl, but he got knocked down by a runaway cow and died in the street. So he was right. So if he waited to go to the Jetavana, then he wouldn't have had the teaching. So that when they told the news to the Buddha that Bahia had passed away, so that wanderer that you met this morning on the Bindabat, on the alms round, he got knocked down by a cow and died in the street. And the Buddha said, "Well, Bahia he had finished his work, and he was the quickest one ever to do that. And he didn't press me with any stupid questions. He was very quick to understand, and so he is not going to be born again anywhere. So that's a helpful way of reflecting on the experience of our senses when we see a particular object, when we smell something, when we hear something, to be able to say, in the heard there is only the heard, in the smelt there is only the smelt, in the seen there is only the seen. Just to remind that if that trigger goes off, like, yes, that's my color, orange, or orange, it's them, then you can say, oh, that in the seen there is only the seen, in the heard there is only the heard. And then it brings it back to that quality of simplicity. Now, it might sound like with that we're trying to just sort of numb ourselves or just disconnect and to, say, dissociate from society. But what you find, and what is really the essence of the middle way, is that when we come back to that origin, that root, then we are able to respond to situations much more effectively. We're able to, say, attune to what is useful to the time, the place, the situation. And so that, and sometimes in meditation instruction, it does come across that we're encouraged to sort of switch off or not feel. Often a meditation teacher will say, you should just watch, be the observer, be the watcher, the puru. And it can seem like, oh, I'm supposed to just dissociate from everything, just watching, just feeling, just listening. But what we're doing in that is that we're actually disabling the natural connection that we have with all things. Your ability to act and speak is part of the way things are. So to act and to speak and to engage is not an intrusion upon reality, it's part of reality. And I think that's something that I like to emphasize because it's often misunderstood. So I'm practicing non-attachment. When actually what we're doing is just dissociating. We're kind of freezing our citta, or disconnecting, but when there is a natural and intrinsic connection. So I like to emphasize that our ability to make choices is part of the way things are. Your initiative, your capacity to act and to choose is not upsetting the way things are, it is part of the way things are. And so that when we talk about non-attachment or not clinging, it doesn't mean not engaging in society, not engaging in family discussions, or not engaging in the working world, not at all. But rather, it's in a way embodying the middle way itself. So when we talk about, sometimes we talk about dealing with polarities, with just sort of, well, should I act or should I be quiet? Well, I'll act half the time and be quiet half the time. Just 50-50. Or should I, and so that can seem to be like the middle way. But I like to emphasize that rather than the middle way being half active and half quiet, or half socialist and half, say, capitalist, that it's not just 50-50, but the middle way is rather where the two poles arise from. So if I can use this microphone. So if we take this is one pole, this is, say, one political party over here, the other political party over there. The middle way is not just half and half, or let's say this is royalism, or republicanism, and then half royalist, half republican, sort of being 50-50. But rather, it's where the two meet, the pivot. That's where the middle way is, where those two polarities emanate from. So the middle way is not just, say, between activity and passivity, half active, half passive, or half royalist, half republican, half Brexit, half European, but rather where the middle way is a quality of attention that is completely attuned to the present moment, And so that the middle way is not just 50-50 of taking action or not taking action, or acting half the time and being quiet half the time, but embodying that quality of attunement. That is the middle way, is that listening heart that is paying attention to the present. So those of you with the King's Scholars Society, I imagine that most of you have some education in English literature, a little bit perhaps. And if you have, you're probably aware of some of Shakespeare's plays. And amongst those, you might have heard of Hamlet, which is a tragedy of Hamlet, Prince of Denmark. There's a famous speech in Hamlet where he's trying to decide what to do. So Hamlet knows that his uncle has murdered his father and married his mother. So Hamlet's uncle has killed his dad, the king, and has married the queen. Hamlet knows this, but he doesn't know what to do about it. So there is this speech where he gives, which is very famous, where he says, "To be or not to be, that is the question." And it's in kind of classical English, but I can translate it for you. So he says, "Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or by taking arms against a sea of troubles, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them." So, to suffer, is it the right thing to be passive, to just suffer, and to be, say, giving in to the way things are, to surrender to the way things are, to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, to just, okay, here it is, I'll just receive it all and get trampled on? Or should I oppose, to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them? Should I contend against the way things are? Should I attack my uncle and depose him and reveal the truth that he killed my father? Should I just be quiet and shut up and pretend none of it's happened? What should I do? But so you have these two polarities of, do I capitulate, do I surrender to the way things are, or do I oppose the way things are? And I would say that the middle way, and Shakespeare doesn't quite express it like this, but I would say the middle way that is not whether we act and oppose the way things are and force it to go my way, or we completely surrender and switch off and dissociate, but rather the middle way is working with the way things are, rather than just going passive and switching off or contending to get our way, but that working with the way things are from a quality of mindfulness and wisdom. And that's what's going to lead things to a most beneficial result. So to finish with the last thing I'd like to offer is the way I like to talk about that kind of attunement is to use the phrase unentangled participating. Just two very long English words. Unentangled, so that there's a lack of grasping and clinging, but it's participating. You're joining in with the way things are, but without grasping, without clinging. So I'm not sure what a good Thai translation would be for unentangled participating. I'll leave that to the translation team to work out. But it's also, Ajahn Sujito called this hands-on letting go, which is a bit of an easier way to digest that. Hands-on letting go, unentangled participating. So we're engaging in the family concerns or the society, the particular issues that are live, that need to be attended to, but without that quality of grasping and clinging. So we're not just trying to switch off and not be involved, like I'm just viveking. I'm just retreating, but we're prepared to engage, to speak up, to use our own initiative, our own perspectives, but with an attitude that is free of grasping, free of clinging, free of attachment, and then that will be what brings, I would suggest, the most beneficial results. So I offer these thoughts for consideration this evening. I also realize there isn't a clock here, so...
Thanks, Kap.
But,
So we have about 20 minutes for questions or comments. So anybody would like to, okay, please. I need to pass the microphone around because I don't want to climb up and down all the time. Sorry.
Good evening, Sawadee Kap, Namaskar, Your Holiness. My name is Imtiaz Muqbil. I'm a local journalist. I cover the travel and tourism industry. I've been covering the industry for the last 40 years. And in a way, it epitomizes many of the contradictions that you very clearly and succinctly outlined, include particularly the issue of polarization. On the one hand, the travel and tourism industry is very vital to this country's economy, creates enormous amounts of jobs, poverty alleviation schemes, etc., etc. But on the other hand, there's a darker side which is directly related to the promotion or the involvement or the entanglement of the 7 deadly sins. And I don't need to go into those. It's a contradiction in terms, and sometimes I find myself deeply troubled by some of the things that I see. There is an economic value. On the other hand, there is a seamy social and cultural side. As a country, how does one reconcile that? Two completely different polarizations, but sometimes it creates an enormous moral and ethical problem, particularly for journalists like myself in reporting the two sides of the story. And I would really welcome your advice, Your Holiness, in trying to overcome that.
Well, I've never been called Your Holiness before, but I'll endeavor to climb over that.
For want of a better word, Your Holiness, Your Eminence.
So the short answer will be with mindfulness, because everything that you write, I mean, I'm not a journalist, but I have done a lot of writing, so everything that you write is written in the present moment, and it's in respect to a particular issue, so that if you say have a column that you're contracted to produce for a newspaper or a magazine, and then they say, oh, we need a piece about XYZ, then to raise that as a genuine question within your own heart. Okay, what's valuable to say about this? What are the downsides? What is to be encouraged? What seems to be a wholesome way forward? So that you're not pretending that the dark side is not there, and but you're also considering, okay, how can this be presented? I'm a journalist. This is my job to put this into words or to talk about this. How can I put this into words that encourages what is wholesome and beneficial and discourages what is unwholesome and unbeneficial? And so that with things like the 7 deadly sins and the darker side of the tourist industry, I'm not well acquainted with the details, but also you can talk about what benefits the society and the wholesome activities that tourists can engage in that bring genuine benefit and blessings to a society, and also tourist activities that have a very destructive and harmful effect. And so that those what they call non-bankable returns, I believe is the technical term, that the non-bankable effects of the way that we act, the choices that we make, and so encouraging those non-bankable human interactions and qualities that can be of benefit, and the ones that are destructive, to be discouraging those. But each situation is unique, so that you can't come up with a formula that says, oh, I'll always say this or I'll never say that. I would say that embodying that middle way is like, okay, so this is an interesting area. How can I talk about it here? What's going to be of benefit here? Because I have to take things into consideration. And so that being ready to attune to a unique or challenging detail. Like, for example, in the northeast of Thailand, before Ajahn Pasno came to join me in California, then he was very active in the Ubon area and helping to get some local social programs in place. So that the Western monks had been donated some land right by the Mekong River, and the local villagers made a lot of their money from illegal logging. And so that then the Sangha kind of moving into that area, where then Ajahn Pasno realized that in talking with the locals, they didn't want to be engaged in illegal activity, and they wanted to preserve the forests, but it was the only way they could get money in that area at that time. So he realized what he needed to do was to create some programs that enabled the villagers to have alternative livelihoods. So he established some local industries, so like broom making and such like, and setting up workshops in the villages, so they had an alternative stream of income. You couldn't say, stop cutting trees and then expect to live a healthy life with your families. There had to be some kind of alternative way. Ajahn Pasno did not become a monk in order to develop broom factories. But then considering that, well, this is the situation in this particular area, what can we do? What's possible here? And so it was to his own surprise that was a way to go. But it was quite successful and gave an alternative funding stream for the local communities. So that being ready to think outside the box and look at each situation in a unique way, I think that's also part of it. You can't generalize.
ได้ครับไม่ต้องอัดวิดีโอเนาะ
Thank you. To address part of your talk when you were saying you feel a sense of conflict or unease when you have a certain judgment, and you said to try and go and trace the origin of the things. But the question I have then is, what do you do if you cannot remember, or even the other people, your friends and family around you, cannot remember that this particular event transpired or the like?
Good question. If none of you can remember where the argument started, that could be a reason to say, let's just drop this. None of us can remember what the initial problem, and sometimes there are ancient feuds that are like that. It's like, can we actually remember what this argument was in the first place? Like, well, if we can't even recall what it was about, shall we just bury this? And at the end of the Patimokkha recitation, the monk's rules, there's a list of 7 ways of settling conflicts. And the last one on the list is covering over with grass, Tinavatara Koti. So that if there's no other way of settling it, or you can't remember what the whole thing was about, let's just cover this over with grass and leave it leave it be. So that if a conflict is persisting, also to explore that with each other, it's like to say, well, we seem to be at odds with each other, and it's not so much about what the original problem was, but how rude and how unkind we've been to each other over the last 10, 20 years. So one way forward with that is that to say, to make the gesture of asking for forgiveness, whether I was in the right or in the wrong, please, for anything that I've done or said in the last 15, 20 years, or however long the conflict has lasted, I'm sure that I've said and done things that were out of order, so please, I ask for your forgiveness. And if someone says, no, I won't forgive you, then that's, at least you've made the gesture to try and to let things end. I hope that's helpful. In Hawaii, they have a principle in some of the Hawaiian islands. There's a principle called ho'oponopono, which is when you can't come to an agreement, you agree that you can't agree. It's like everyone says, this is completely irreconcilable, so we'll put this in the ho'oponopono category. Okay, we all agree to say this is unsettleable. Okay, we're good, let's go home. So that I think societies have developed these ways of dealing with old and bitter conflicts, but it's often as I was saying, it's often what we've said and done along the way that's been more harmful and more divisive than what the original issue was about.
Venerable. Hi. Uh, as someone who's been diagnosed of schizophrenia and depression, I suffer the polarity of the mind, and I've been prescribed with psychiatric medication, which I have to take daily, every night. So I'm wondering, can a person who takes these chemically made, manufactured medication progress towards nibbana if he does is meditation more powerful than these chemically I don't know how to say it, like the chemicals that are produced with the medication? Can meditation fight that or beat that?
I'm not a medical doctor, but I would say that our body is a large chemical experiment. It's like an ongoing chemical experiment. And so if there are chemicals that we can take, like I've got this cold, people have given me lots of chemicals to deal with this cold. You know, if I say, no, I'm not going to have any chemicals or this lemon juice. No. I don't want to interfere with the natural process. I'll deal with this with my mind. It'd be a bit ridiculous. The Buddha quite happily took medicine. He had a doctor. Dr. Jivaka was he took medical treatment. And so I feel it's quite okay to be using medications and antidepressants or things. Just like if you're a diabetic, insulin is available. Great, take it. Otherwise, you'll die. So that personally, it's I mean, you make your own decisions, but I don't feel shy about taking medications that are balancing out things within the system. And so, I mean, again, you make your own decisions. I'm not able to give any kind of categorical do this, don't do that advice. That's not what I would do. But I would say, in principle, those chemicals can be really helpful if the body's got things out of whack, and then adding a few chemicals in that help to rebalance it. That's not a bad thing. Everything does depend on the attitude that we have towards that, and the way that we work things. But I remember when I was living in the States, one of the people who was the most regular sort of friends and supporters of the monastery, she said, this was about 15 years ago now, she said, Ajahn, I've become a Zoloftian. I said, what's a Zoloftian? She said, well, I've been prescribed, I've had depression for the last 40 years, and I've been prescribed Zoloft, and this is having a fantastic effect. It's like this kind of, this dark blanket has just lifted off my brain. And so I'm not sure if I'm a Buddhist or I'm a Zoloftian now. And so talking with her, and her husband is a psychiatrist, you know, and so they're a very well-informed family. And so she was talking about this in quite a matter-of-fact way, how, you know, that is it okay that I just taking these medications, this has this radical beneficial effect. It just makes everything so much clearer, so much more helpful and workable in my ordinary daily life. And so in that respect, I said, well, you know, you're the one who's measuring it, if you can see there are those beneficial effects, obviously you treat those things with care, but you can't pretend it's like having lived in a sort of a dark, dank little space, and suddenly, you know, the lights are on and the windows are open and you've got fresh air after 40 years. So if that's your experience, well, don't have to pretend that it's not happening or that it's not a pleasant and helpful change. Again, it depends on how you handle that, or you become sort of dependent or carried away by that. But I thought that was a very informative discussion that I had with her. I said, well, you know, if you're feeling all these beneficial effects, then fine, great. It's just like if you had diabetes and suddenly you had insulin available, great. You know, it means you can function much more freely in your ordinary everyday life. So make hay while the sun shines, as they say. I would say so, but you know, you have to prove that for yourself. Yes.
Yes. Can you elaborate on your principle of unentangled participation? Because for me and for many people that I know, we choose to participate on issues that we find important or that resonate with us in some ways. So in other words, it seems that the act of participation requires that we attach ourselves to the issues in some ways. So how can we participate without being actually entangled by what we participate in?
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, I would say it hinges a lot around attitude. So if you realize, if you have the attitude that the way that you're taking hold of a particular issue or a particular principle, if there is a lot of ego in that, it's like, I am this is what I'm doing, I want this to succeed, then it'll probably lead to more conflict. If there's the attitude, well, this is a skillful means, it's not the answer to everything, but it's a tool that can be used, so let's use this tool. It's not who and what I am, but it's a tool that can be used to have a particular effect. Like Lumpur Cha was a very sincere and dedicated and strict Theravadan monk. And his monastery was very, very rigorous standard of Vinaya discipline. But when you met him, you had this sense that he was not limited by the robe or by Theravada Buddhism or by Buddhism at all. Just that nothing limited him. And he was extremely respectful for all the traditions and the robes and the fitting in with the Thai society. But it was really clear, just in the way he spoke and in his manner, that he was not identified with the conventions he was using. That he was, and he would talk about holding but not clinging. So he would hold the convention but not cling to it. So he would quite happily sit here and say, there are no Thais here, there are no foreigners, there are no women, there are no men, there are no monastics, there are no lay people. These are just conventions that we create and we get lost in them. And that and he would mean it, absolutely. He'd say there aren't any men or women here. These are just conventions that we create and we attach labels to, then we get lost in the creations that we've made. So that the skill is in holding but not clinging. So it doesn't mean never hold anything, but if you are, say, taking up a particular side, you're engaging in a particular way, then you can do that with sincerity, with wholeheartedness, but without clinging, without attachment. So that, and I feel that was a fantastic example, the Lumpur Cha's life, that he was 100% sincere Theravada Buddhist monk, but completely unlimited by anything in the human world. And so that I would say that's really the embodiment of the middle way, is where we can hold and not cling. It's a challenge, not easy to do, but it's in a way what makes the use of any convention, any kind of structure, it makes it much more workable and comfortable for us. So that if I think I am a Buddhist monk, or I am a Theravadan, or I am a man, or I am British, as an absolute reality, then there's suffering right there. If you recognize, well, there's Theravada Buddhism as an invention, but it's a useful invention, or calling myself a man, or calling myself British, it's a useful convention. It's not an absolute reality, but it's good enough. You know, my passport got me into Thailand yesterday morning. So British, it's on the stamped on it, so it's good enough to stand up as a convention. But if I think I'm absolutely British, every atom of this body is British, it's ridiculous, you know. So that if there is that mindfulness and wisdom that recognizes this is just a convention, this is just a samuti satcha, a conventional truth that's being picked up for a particular purpose. That if you say, like, no, I do belong to this party, you know, this is my company, you know, this is my family, I am this, then that to the degree that the mind is grasping that identity is the degree to which polarity is being created. If we want to get to the place where there's no polarization, the middle, then it's recognizing that, yes, I belong to this party, my name is on the document, but that can't be the whole story. That's just a set of conventions that we use for a particular purpose.
Hi, the red shirt here. Hi. I have no question. I just want to commend you for such a great talk, and it's all about agreeing to disagree. And my friends and I, we've been following you for a couple of years. We started at Sapan Kwai there, and then, so I'm also a journalist as well. Hi, I know you. I wish that this tape, whatever you said just now, could be replayed in the US Congress, and maybe at the British Parliament. Perhaps maybe Russian President Vladimir Putin should hear about this so that Ukraine wouldn't have to suffer. It was a very good talk. Thank you very much.
And I hope you excuse me for using the red shirt example along the way. I wasn't thinking of you, but I just...
No, I'm the rainbow color, you know, pride for LGBT. So red is just so that I look bright today.
Very good. Thank you.
For this
Thank you.
particular talk.
There's one there, yeah.
Swadika, Prajan. I also would like to thank you so much for enlightening us today. I have a quick question. I am an economist, I'm a researcher. So my job is to actually analyze things that go on in the economy in an unbiased way. We should be data-driven, right? We should do the analysis in an unbiased way. But in this situation in Thailand at the moment, where it's very polarized, I find that when we want to do an analysis, people whom we talk to usually would like to convince us to take their side and convince us that their policies are good, are better than the other party's policies. So I think back to what you said on the fact that we can be engaged, but we don't need to cling. So that's what I'm trying to do. I try to be engaged with them, but I don't want to cling. But they would like me to cling. So what do you do in these situations when people who are clingy would like you to cling to their beliefs? Thank you.
Yeah, very, very good question. I would say one of the most helpful things is the development of body awareness. Like if you're in an encounter, like if you're an economist and you're analyzing data and you're trying to weigh up your sets of massaged statistics that you've been fed by the different groups, saying, these don't read the same way. So that if you're by yourself, kind of looking at the statistics, and it's one thing, and you can be, I would say, more easily unbiased. But then when you're face to face with somebody saying, "Oh, this is actually true," and their data is rubbish because of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, then in that kind of an encounter, whether it's face to face or on a Zoom call or whatever, to develop body awareness, like what is your body doing when you're being kind of confronted by a different set of opinions, or you're feeling intimidated, or someone's trying to overwhelm you with data. So to bring your attention into the body and notice, oh, my shoulders are up around my ears, or my stomach is tight as a drum. To notice what your body is doing, and to put a part of your attention as you're listening to the other person just into your body, to relax, just to let your shoulders drop, let your face relax, let your stomach relax, let your hands relax, and just to be. It's like if you're out in the sea and there's a big wave coming in. It's just relax. It's going to hit you, and rather than tensing up against it, you just let the whole body sort of move with that force. And so that it's not the first thing that we're doing usually when we're being confronted by someone or trying to be persuaded in an energetic way. We're kind of preparing our response, or we're we're resisting the input. But if we don't go along with that, but just let the whole system be more at ease, then you can find that mysterious middle. And you find that you can say things like, "Thank you for sharing. That's a really interesting perspective." Full stop. And as Buddhists, we don't lie, and so that you can sustain that truthfulness and say, "Well, this gives a different picture." You're not saying I agree with you or I disagree with you. But if they say, "Well, but you agree that this is right. This is that these are the correct figures," you say, "Well, I understand that that's your perspective." The being polite, being clear, and I am character-wise, I used to be very, very drawn into other people's moods and how they were talking, and I'd find myself agreeing with people when I didn't really agree at all, and just sort of swept along by their own energy and enthusiasm. So I've kind of had to work with this area a lot myself, and I find myself volunteering for things that I was not interested in. It's like, how did I get my name on this? Why me? Well, so that way of politely receiving what's being given to you, but not feeling you have to act on it or validate it. Just saying, "Well, I understand this is extremely important to you." And just leaving it at that. And so, and then you're coming from a place of kindness, of respect, and the more sincere you can be in that, then the better the system will work. Because it's really, I would say, you're putting mindfulness and wisdom into the chair, the chairing that particular encounter, and then, and if the other person says, "Well, but we've got to have an answer by the end of today," or "You've got to validate this. This is so important," you say, "Well, I understand that it's important to you," or "That's part of your schedule. Have a good day." So that you're being polite, you're being respectful, you're being sincere, but you're not being drawn into where other people are at. And so sometimes people can say, "Well, if you don't agree with me, then you're opposed to me." You say, "Well, you're totally entitled to that perspective. I don't feel that's the case, but if you want to hold it that way, that's your business." And so it takes quite a bit of mindfulness to. But the more you develop that body awareness and the body is really at ease and settled, then it makes it much easier to respond in that way, where you're not being dismissive or like, "Oh, you're upset, aren't you?" Like, "Go away and leave me alone." But rather you are coming from a place of sincerity, but you're not intimidated by somebody else's mood or enthusiasm or kind of threat. And I've been in that kind of encounter a few times where someone says, "Well, if you don't agree with me, then you hate me or you oppose me." I said, "No, I don't have any opinion about you. I just don't agree with what you're saying." Okay. Sure. Yes.
Anybody? We have a very engaging group of audience. Okay.
While we're waiting for the last question, I'm reminded of sometimes attachment to opinions and unskillful behavior can have very beneficial results. Not that I'm encouraging obnoxious behavior, but this is a part of my family story. So my father came from a group of 9 brothers and sisters. And the eldest brother was called Herbert. And he was, from early childhood, he was very pompous, very egotistical, very inflated. So even as a small child, he was known as the Duke, like Il Duce. He was very proud of himself. And so the family had a small building company in London, Ashby and Horner Building Company. So when the founder of the company passed away, he left everything to the eldest son, Herbert. And then the other 8 brothers and sisters were still around, but Herbert was the owner of the company. And so then Herbert was so obnoxious, so difficult, no one would marry him. And it was very difficult to keep anyone around to even work for him. So when he went away on holiday, my great aunt, Catherine, who was one of the younger sisters, she thought, well, he's so obnoxious, he's so difficult, no one can live with him. He's the head of a building company, his house is a mess. It hasn't been redecorated for years. The roof is a mess, the paintwork's all worn down, the front door is all peeling. We should redecorate his house while he's away for a month. So my great aunt Catherine set to work and they did a renovation job on his house while he was away. This did not go down well. So when the Duke returned from his holiday, and he saw that his house had been redecorated without his permission, and his comment to the other siblings was, if you can waste money on all of this, then you don't need any from me. And he was particularly aggrieved at the color of the front door. So my great aunt Catherine was in the doghouse, as they say. Anyway, cut a long story short, when he died, the only one of his siblings that he felt had not been part of this dreadful plot to ruin his house was his younger brother Leonard. So when he died, he left everything to his brother Leonard. Leonard had 2 children, Iseline and Frith. So the son Frith, he died in the First World War. So after that, by about 1916, he had 1 child, Iseline. Iseline Horner was unusually at that time a scholar of Sanskrit and Pali. She was the only academic in the family. She had by chance met the founder of the Pali Texas Society when she was 12, and he was impressed by her and said, young lady, when you grow up you should study Sanskrit and Pali. So she did. She was a student at Newnham College in Cambridge, and so then when her father Leonard passed away, then all the money from the company came eventually to Iseline. And so Iseline, by that time, was the secretary of the Pali Text Society. So from the 1930s until today, the money that has supported the Pali Text Society was all the money that came from the Ashby and Horner sale, so that being obnoxiously proud and aversive to your family, by my great uncle Herbert, that obnoxious mental state led to the Pali Text Society being able to survive for nearly 100 years. And it would not have had a hope of surviving that long without that money. So my great uncle's extremely unskillful mind state led to a huge amount of Pali literature being available and translations into English. And I.B. Horner was the first person to translate the whole of the Vinaya Pitaka into English. So when I showed up at Wat Bananachat in 1978, and I saw these Vinaya books on the bookshelf translated by I.B. Horner, I thought, I wonder if she's a relative. Oh, ha, 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 ha. That's likely. And then when I got back to England a couple of years later, I found out from my father, he said, you must take after my cousin Bobby. I think she wrote a book about Buddhism. So I found out she was the same person. So sometimes attachment to views and being obnoxious can have good results, but I don't recommend that you try that, because it is rare in the world, but it's a beautiful feature that the Pali Text Society is, the result is survived because of my great uncle's attachment to the color of his front door. So, okay,
Yeah.
one last one.
Yeah, Namaskaran. Ha. Can you hear me okay with the mic sound? Okay, yeah. Actually, I just come to state like working towards mindfulness. And the more I practice at work or in real life situation, just the less opinion I have. I just like, okay, do you have any comment on this? I just thought, it's just kind of no comment. I don't know, it's just like good or bad in the way like that. But every day I'm happier. That's what I only know. Just like, okay, you think that way? Okay, fine. Do you have any comment on this? But that is that, and no. I don't have any opinion. I don't have comment on that. It's like that, but I don't really know that is the way or is like thin line between ignorance and then being like what you call yes.
Well, these things are not fixed, so it all depends on the tasanakati, the attitude. If it's vibhavatana, like I don't care, whatever, I don't mind, then if that kind of, it might bring a certain quietness, but if it's based on that aversion, vibhavatana, that pushing away, it's going to be painful eventually, because that'll become a habit, and then it goes into your relationships and the rest of your life, and so it's like any kind of a tool. It depends on how it's used moment by moment. And so you can see that right now, so that when you work in that way, it's more peaceful, okay. But does it mean it's always going to be peaceful? No, it doesn't. So the satipanya is the most important element, seeing how things are handled and the results. As soon as we think, okay, this is really good, therefore it will always be good in every situation, as Kaujai that's a wrong understanding. But you can recognize, yeah, at the moment, working with this way, because if you had so many opinions about everything, just to stop that is just a bit of a relief. But if you then think, okay, therefore, ever to have any opinion about anything is wrong, then it's going too far. So the satipanya is that mindfulness and wisdom that it's highlighting, okay, that has worked, it's had this result, so what can I learn from that? What does that say about this situation? So you're not taking things for granted. And again, this is a great characteristic both of Luang Por Sumedho and Luang Por Chah, is that extraordinary skill about reading situations, reading people, not taking things for granted. So that one of the things that Luang Por Chah would often say is, "Tuk on." Yeah, wait and see. Yeah, let's kind of have a look at it and tuk on. Yeah, and just let's see how it turns out. You watch, be aware, see how things turn out, rather than being making assumptions about things.
Yeah, and then followed by mai nae, right?
Yes, yeah. Because even when things go really well, you say, oh, this is great, this is exactly what I wanted, therefore this is good. Mai nae, because sometimes the good things we get, I mean, like, and probably for everybody here, there've been some events in our life. You got a promotion, you got a new job, you got your degree, or you got a new property. Yes, this is great. And then a year later, oh, what hua? Why was I celebrating? This is a nightmare. It's the perfect house, but wow, I forgot about neighbors. Or that, yeah, it's a great job, but I didn't take into account the people I'd have to work with. Ooh, the other humans. So that again, that mai nae is don't make assumptions, don't take for granted, don't say that things are absolutely good. Okay.
So I think we have come to the end. So on behalf of everybody, I would like to express my deepest gratitude and appreciation forท่านอาจารย์ to spend this enlightening evening tonight with us, to share all the stories dating back to Buddha's period, to share Ajahn Sumedho's story, and it's very inspiring and very encouraging for us to live in this kind of polarized society. So with that, I would like to thank Prajan again, and I think at least for myself, the takeaway is I may be right in fact, but wrong in Dhamma. So with that, we would like to grab Prajan together. Okay, ครับ ขอบคุณมากๆครับสาธุอนุโมทนาบุญด้วยกันทุกคนนะครับ ท่านอาจารย์มีอะไรจะพูดหรือไหม Have anything else to say No okay so maybe photo or It's very not ergonomic sitting arrangement this one so sorry yeah It's very good เดี๋ยวใครอยากถ่ายรูปกับท่านอาจารย์ก็น่าจะได้นะครับอ่ะมาถ่ายรูปที่ไหนถ่ายของเราใช่ใช่ใช่เดี๋ยวโอเคครับได้ครับ
Very good.
อ๋อ thank you you're coming น้องฝันก็มาโอเคสวัสดีค่ะสวัสดีครับสวัสดีครับเชิญนักเรียนทุนแล้วเรียนหลวงเดี๋ยวประกาศเชิญนักเรียนทุนแล้วเรียนหลวงทุกคนมาถ่ายรูปร่วมกันหน่อยนะครับ